Erica, Kirk are the people that I just despise that are in the industry now and that we have to supposedly back. And this is why Israel ultimately took him out, because they wanted that influence and he was not giving it to them, or giving him very, very micro doses of it when they wanted the whole thing out of sheer greed. They wanted him, and unfortunately they didn't have anything on him. When I think of Charlie Kirk and I think of her, they are the solar opposites of one another. What's up, guys? This is God, Grit, and Glory, and I am your host, Veto Creed. We talk about the stuff that most people stay quiet about: Jesus, business, politics, and occasionally a few conspiracy theories. No scripts, no filters, just straight up truth. So join us as we unravel and speak truth. Welcome all, this is Veto Creed with God, Grit, and Glory, and we'll have another episode for you today. So today is a special day. This weekend is a special weekend. It is the 250th anniversary of America. It has been 250 years since that day that the Declaration of Independence was written. It is an amazing day because it was written by somebody none other than Thomas Jefferson. I actually didn't know a whole lot of details about how the Declaration of Independence was written. Originally, there was a lot going on. Obviously, George Washington was trying to fight the Brits. Just so you guys understand, Benedict Arnold was actually, trying to screw him over. There was a bunch of times where there was things going on. For those people that know who Kelsey Grammer is, he's actually one of my favorite actors on the planet. I remember Charlie Kirk during a podcast. I was at his Turning Point USA event. He was standing probably about 5 feet away from me as I was listening to him. And he was talking about a lot of the things in his life that he enjoyed. He enjoyed watching Frasier. He said he loves the show Frasier. I don't know why this conversation came up. He's talking about some of the things he loved in life and some of the people he respected and some of his quote-unquote heroes and some of the shows that he admired. And it came up that Frasier was one of them. He also mentioned the fact that Michael Jordan was somebody he admired. And if you knew my obsession with Michael Jordan, I probably have about 50 pairs of his shoes. I have signed basketballs and cards and jerseys and whatnot that I've collected over the years. And the thing is I admire these players. I admire specifically Michael Jordan because of his devote, just tenacity and his work ethic. I admire people that work extra hard. I've been obviously talking about going through Proverbs recently, and Proverbs talks about how God abhors lazy people. He doesn't like when people are extremely lazy. And let me tell you something. This story with Kelsey Grammer, it's a series that was released on Amazon Prime recently, and it's called Historical Battles of America. Like I said, it's on Prime Video for people that want to watch a fun story. I think it's like 4 parts. Like 45 minutes or 50 minutes a piece. It's one of those bingers you sit down and you kind of watch maybe in one sitting. I think I watched it all in one day. But it's very interesting because it talks about the true history of America. He also released a movie, by the way. There's an official trailer. It's called Young Washington, starring William Franklin Miller as George Washington and Kelsey Grammer as Lord Thomas Fairfax. And this is actually on Angel Studios. You guys can go check it out. But the story is, originally I thought it was interesting because the show that he does on the history here, the 4-part series on Amazon, is talking about the Declaration of Independence that was written by a young Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson, to give you guys a little bit of a backstory, he was a very, very young, basically, he wasn't a diplomat, but he was a really wealthy, inherently wealthy young, basically, squire. He was like a young kid. He ultimately didn't really know what he was going to do with his life. He was very, very successful. He's very, very intelligent. He's very, very educated. He was very, I want to say, spoon-fed with a silver spoon. He grew up in wealth. He didn't need to do the stuff that he was doing. But he got invited to come over and sit in on one of these congressional meetings. And by the way, back in the days, they weren't like these political bureaucracy meetings that you see nowadays, when the House gets together and they argue about stupid bills about transgenderism and all this other trash, stuff actually had meaning because they were fighting actively with the Brits and they were trying to get independence from the Brits. And by the way, just to give you guys an understanding on where the history was, it's exactly where we are right now, trying to fight, quote unquote, Israel. There's an Israel war going on right now. The Israeli war, by the way, is existing. The people in America are either pro-Israel or they're against it. And more people are silent or for it than against it. So you have a very small group of people that are just like, you know what, we're sick and tired of Israel. They have, certain states and certain, federal laws they're trying to push to try to ban discrimination against them, anti-Semitism, which I called anti-Satanism. We're not anti-Semitic, we're just anti-Satan. So if you're going to bring your Satanism into our culture and force feed us your Satanism, which is transgenderism, racism, all, and the thing is, it is nationalism, because when you're for Israel as a Zionist, you're a full devout nationalist for the Israeli cause and this Israeli state of Israel. So let me tell you something. It's pretty disgusting to me, the fact that we're in a war these days that the same Brits were fighting. When the Americans separated themselves and they came here in we'll say the 1600s, and Columbus discovered it. We know that wasn't the original story, and there were some arguments that it was Jews that pushed Columbus into America. Of course, we know the fact that it was already occupied at some point by some say that it was the Mongolians that came here, which ultimately turned into the natives, which we see as the Native Americans now. They were clearly not of a white descent. They had a semi-Asian kind of islander vibe. Some argue the fact that they came from places like Hawaii and Fiji Islands. Basically, they were basically settlers that traveled and eventually landed here and found their own lands, which I wouldn't be surprised. The natives are really good at living off the land. They built ships that essentially are not as advanced as the Brits had, of course, but they had pretty decent ships that got them to places like America, and they came and discovered it well before Brits did. But when they came here, essentially there was a war going on, and George Washington was trying to fight against the Brits. He essentially didn't want them to invade, and they took dominance over everything that was around. They wanted to push the British agenda to make sure everything was under the British control and under the Queen. And they were trying to separate themselves away from this. And this is where they got the bright idea of writing the Declaration of Independence. And that happened 250 years ago to date. There was 56 delegates who signed the Declaration of Independence, representing the 13 colonies, most signed on August 2nd, by the way, 1776, although a few signed later. Here are the signers by colony. So New Hampshire, you had Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton. Massachusetts is John Hancock, which we obviously know who he is. It's the famous John Hancock. When we say, let me get your Hancock, we're referring to him. Samuel Adams, who actually, by the way, was brothers of John Adams. And then Robert Treat Paine and Elbridge Gerry, they're all from Massachusetts. Then you have Rhode Island, which was Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery. Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, Oliver Walcott. New York was William Floyd, and so forth. I mean, you got a ton of people here, and the list is long. I can go through all 56 of them, but to be honest with you, you guys are not going to know 95% of these people. Thomas Jefferson was obviously the principal author, and he's the one that wrote it. And there was a lot of stuff in his original document, by the way, that was disputed. He originally wanted to abolish slavery in his document. His declaration was rewritten. They didn't want to push a very aggressive agenda because a lot of people were against abolishing slavery. We lived in a very democratic, quote unquote, environment. He was more of a Republican mindset. They wanted to abolish. The first person that wanted to abolish slavery entirely was Abraham Lincoln. He was for abolishing slavery. That's ultimately why he died. He got killed and assassinated for that exact reason, because he wanted to remove something away from the elites that they wanted to keep for themselves for a very, very long time. They were comfortable having the slaves that they had. It was the same ideology that was back in the day of Pharaoh, where Pharaoh was so used to having slaves for 400 years. And he said, you know what? No, I'm not going to let your people go because I've gotten used to this lifestyle of them building pyramids for me. Benjamin Franklin was one of the signers as well, and one of the oldest signers during the time. And then Edward Rutledge was 26 years old. He was the youngest signer of the time. They were all basically as governors, diplomats, judges, or members of Congress. Many risked their freedoms, their property, and their lives by signing a document declaring independence from the Great Britain, because there was this devotion. There was like this nationalism, that they had a lot of people conspiring, of course, on top of that against these people and wanted to kill him. In fact, the Great Brits had sent in a spy to be the right-hand man of George Washington. If George Washington, by the way, had been taken down, he was a colonel, he was a general. I mean, he was a lot of things before they made him president of the United States, and they didn't really become a presidency per se until they declared themselves as their own nation, right? After the Declaration was signed and the 13 colonies became their own nation. But I will tell you, during this entire history of time, George Washington, they tried to kill him and assassinate him and poison him many, many times. But there was this like divine intervention. There was a lot of times where God had intervened. There was this thing that happened where they were trying to get the Brits out of their colony. So what they did is they were trying to get all the weapons, and they had to go over the mountainside, and it was winter time, and they had to bring, I don't remember, I think it was like 30 or 40 tons of like ammunition, ultimately like cannonballs and cannons and all of the infantry stuff for military back in the days. It was a lot more bulkier, it was a lot more heavier. And he sent one of his sergeants basically on a special assignment, and he was able to successfully get there. And then they had to set up everything because Britain had already infiltrated their area there. So they believed that there was a great intervention. In other words, God had sent a fog in for them to be able to get across the waters where they were not spotted, and they were able to successfully set up all of these cannons. And then when the Brits seen this, they were like, oh man, we're screwed. And the one they were trying to get out of there, I mean, there was multiple. There was General Charles Cornwallis. He's the one that surrendered in Yorktown in 1781. There's General John Burgoyne, surrendered in Saratoga of 1777. And then General Sir Guy Carlson was the last British commander in North America after the Revolutionary War with the Treaty of Paris of 1783. He eventually evacuated New York City in November 25th, 1783, known as Evacuation Day. He did not refuse to leave. He basically said, fine, we give up. And there's a difference between retreating and evacuating and surrendering, by the way. People say, they retreated. That doesn't mean anything. During the war, by the way, back in the days, there was a lot of retreats. And they would retreat because they knew they were outnumbered. They would retreat because they knew that the battle had been won. Not the war, but the battle. There's a difference in military where there's a battle and there's a war. Wars go on forever. Battles are individual. You have to know the difference. I thought it was an interesting history because just the way that Thomas Jefferson writes this letter and everything is trying to be scrapped and disputed. Thomas Jefferson doesn't even realize how good of a job that he did. We know these truths to be self-evident. We know that phrase. I even know that off the top of my head, that all men are created equal, right? He says, we are all equals in the eyes of God. Right? And I found it pretty fascinating because people like Thomas Jefferson they were aligned with God, but they weren't exactly Christians. I mean, a lot of people claim that all of these people were Protestants and yada, 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 and they were Christians. Nope. Majority of them were not. Benjamin Franklin was not, even though his dad was a preacher. George Washington was not, even though he did declare basically a higher power. He referred to it as divine intervention. There was a lot of people in the time of history where God used them to make the great Americas that had little to no understanding of what the true gospel was, had little to no understanding on who Jesus Christ was. but God nevertheless used them to build the America that we have today. But I find it pretty fascinating because it took a great deal of courage to be able to stand up against these people, to be able to stand up against Britons and where they have been connected to them and depended on them for so many centuries, right? And then they turn around and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, and this ideology, by the way, to split away from them, this revolutionary war was very, very unpopular. As much as you guys love to believe, oh yeah, it's the same thing right now that's going on in America, where we have two political powers. We have the Republicans and the Democrats, both of which are pretty corrupt. And you have people like, Thomas Massie coming out, Tucker Carlson coming out, Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out and potentially trying to make their own party and saying, hey, we're sick and tired of being manipulated by the system, by the conglomerate, corrupt capitalistic system, where you guys are bowing your knee to Israel, when you guys are bowing your knee to other countries, and you guys are looking out for their interest before you look out for the interest of Americans. That's where we live as a nation. And I mean, I was fascinated, by the way, with the amount of fireworks everywhere yesterday, but I'm going to tell you, the amount of signage, the amount of stuff we've seen around that banned fireworks and banned this and all of this, and everybody, they want you to fall. And some will say, oh, of course, you don't want to catch, people's houses on fire, God forbid. I mean, you guys should look at some of these compilations where New York City, they're exploding, or Los Angeles, where they banned it. You have literally hundreds of thousands of fireworks exploding, and you could just see it as far as the eye can see. There, people are rebelling against it. They're like, go screw yourself. You know how many fires actually started? Maybe a few in the entire 100-mile radius. I mean, we're not talking about burning the entire city down, but I mean, even this in this town that I live in, the mayor claims to be a Republican, but the number one thing that he does, and he doesn't like me very much, which I'm going to actually be probably running up against him here this year, is he put a sign out that says no fireworks, and he put it literally right next to my house. I mean, it's some passive aggressive crap, because he knows how patriotic I am, and he knows how pro-America I am, and he's seen all of the Trump stuff back in the days when I used to fly it, a lot of it. I mean, I now fly more American flags and America first. That's my style. I believe in a more of a nationalistic approach. I believe we should divide from any of these groups. And the reason I think so is because I don't buy into the narrative. And unfortunately, who has become part of our party that I can't stand? Erica Kirk. Erica Kirk are the people that I just despise, that are in the industry now, and that we have to supposedly back. We have to be behind these people that I cannot stand with a passion. Because she, in my opinion, is the opposite. When I think of Charlie Kirk and I think of her, they are the solar opposites of one another. The solar opposites. They're like extremes. You have a very godly, God-fearing man that was for freedom of speech, allowing people to speak, always looking out for the best interests of his organization, trying to protect everybody's ability to have a say, protecting people's freedom no matter who they were, was not exactly for foreign policy, didn't want America to invade Iran or Iraq or any of the other countries that they had invaded, wanted America to stay out of Palestine, wanted Israel to stay out of Palestine, wanted to create a two-state agreement between Palestine and Israel, but they refused. And they didn't like people like him. They wanted people to bend the knee to their narrative so they have control. And this is what disgusts me about all this. Even right now, people are so utterly indoctrinated, just like they were indoctrinated in the days of Britain and the Great War of Britain, where George Washington was fighting for our basically rights, for our ability, for our inalienable rights. There was 3 rights that were, Thomas Jefferson was referring to them as unalienable rights. In other words, they are rights that are given to us no matter what. We cannot move away from these. It's the rights to life. You have a right to live. In other words, nobody can take your life away from you. That is, the crazy part to me is that's sort of obvious, you would think, right? Me having the ability to breathe and to exist should be a right, right? Without saying, it's like they say there's a saying that it's a right without even saying that it's a right. Like it's obvious, right? And the right to liberty. This one's a little less obvious. You know, we obviously all want liberty. And then, of course, the right to pursuit of happiness. When you want to pursue happiness. I mean, and this is pretty obvious, right? So you have life, like I said, is you are protected from unjust harm or death. Duh. The right to liberty, and I talk about this in my podcast. I am literally red, white, and blue. My podcast is red, white, and blue. My American flag, everything I stand for is red, white, and blue. And let me tell you something. The right to live freely without arbitrary control or oppression. And this is what Charlie Kirk was for. This is exactly, if I were to give Charlie Kirk some credibility here, I would say that he was absolutely for liberty. He practiced this probably more than anything else. The later one, of course, he believed in the first and the second, but the later one, the pursuit of happiness, I mean, he did, but this sort of ties into number 2. And liberty is like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom to assemble peacefully, freedom to own property, freedom to make personal choices within the law. So this is, I mean, and he educated people on this. I mean, even though he was against abortions, he educated people on saying, hey, when you abort, you're killing God's creation. It is murder. There were certain rights, the fact that were passed that stepped over the rules of God and the rules of humanity. And that was a crime against humanity, in his opinion, that they were allowed to kill children that did not belong to them. They think that, this is the crazy part, we live in a world where just because it's made in your womb, you automatically take possession of it as if it belongs to you. The same thing as your children, by the way. Your children, they are technically, indirectly your property up until technically they're 18 years old. And then they can go out on their own. They can do their own thing. But he was for all of these things, and he practiced them extremely well. He was very, very for, protesting and standing up against tyranny and doing all these things as long as it was peaceful. He was for freedom of press because, of course, he was the press. Turning Point was a big media conglomerate. That's what they did. That's majority of this stuff was pumping out content, pumping out news, getting the word out. And this is why Israel ultimately took him out, because they wanted that influence and he was not giving it to them, or giving them very, very micro doses of it when they wanted the whole thing out of sheer greed. They wanted to own him. They wanted him. And unfortunately, they didn't have anything on him. Israel can blackmail, and they could coerce just about anybody into anything. All of these corrupt politicians, they'll say, hey, we know that you have slept with so-and-so, you have a mistress, you're into all of this pedophilia, you're into corruption, you took bribes. They have a whole laundry list on you. You evade taxes, you do this, you do that. And they could literally like bury you into the ground. Meanwhile, Charlie had none of this. He didn't even take a salary for his position at Turning Point. He just put it back into his cause, his foundation. And I hated that for him. They hated that about him. They hated the fact that they didn't have any dirt on him. They weren't able to shake him down. They weren't able to force his hand and turn around and say, hey, we want you to do this. So the only thing that they had left is to basically bribe him. I think who would turn down money? Little did they know that he didn't care about the money. He only cared about his cause. And the pursuit of happiness, I mean, some of it falls into, it's not a guarantee that you will be happy, by the way. It rather protects your freedom to pursue what makes you happy and fulfills your life, right? So the third one is fulfilling your life. Choosing your occupation, of course. I mean, you have the ability. I mean, back in the days, you had slaves, and essentially you fell into certain tasks. There's a lot of countries that assign people roles that where they're going to work. I mean, you go into North Korea and China, you have a lot of more tyrannical governments that sort of force your hand on what you're going to be. Starting a business, of course. I mean, we have one of the biggest entrepreneurship opportunities here in America, outside of everywhere else. I mean, you can open up an LLC with a couple $100 just about anywhere and start whatever business your heart desires. You have all the resources online. artificial intelligence, site building, SEO marketing, you name it. Everything's out. Everything's at your disposal. Raising a family, of course, is protected here. Practicing your faith, because we have, certain things that protect religion. Getting an education. Owning property. By the way, this sounds crazy, but there are a lot of other places in the world where this was not allowed. Like, for example, in the Soviet Union during communism, during the SSSR era, the government owned all properties. You didn't have the right to property. They would give you a property. This was more of a communism, but socialism kind of structure, where they would give you a piece of property and they owned you as long as you own that property. That's the way they controlled you. They can vacate you from that property at any time if you are out of line. They can basically take that property away from you. And you can look into this history. It's crazy. Even the time of my parents, by the way, my dad acquired a piece of property by himself. The government isn't really fond of that. They don't like you owning your own property. They would much rather hand these properties over to you instead of you working for them. And the contingencies are you stay loyal, you're a nationalist to the cause in the Soviet Union during the time, and you do not vacate that property, and you do not move around, you do not leave, you do not leave the nation, you do not travel around. They want to keep you put. They want to keep you still in one spot. And that's sort of indirectly the structure here in America. They tie you up into mortgage debts. They tie you up into a job, and they tie you up into all of these extracurricular activities such as kids' sports and ballets and all this other lessons and languages and piano lessons and personal tutoring. And then on the side, you may have a little bit of time to go watch a hockey game or a football game or a baseball game or a basketball game or a FIFA game, because FIFA's going on right now. So they consume all of your energy and your time. That way you have no time for anybody else, especially for him, for God. They want to consume your time. They want to steal it. If there's a saying that if the devil cannot get you, he will distract you. He'll keep you busy. He'll keep you distracted away from knowing truth. He will fill your head with void. In other words, with like devoid, like trash. Useless, basically trash. We are in ways, by the way, guys, one of the most artificial intelligence, even though we're technically not artificial, but in the eyes of God, we are sort of artificial. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. We are basically a computer, a very, 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 very advanced CPU. For people that know what a CPU is, it's basically the brains in a motherboard in a computer with flesh. That's what we are. We're a brain operated by neurons and nerves and nerve centers and that have all these pulses and impulses and stuff like that, and everything kind of travels through all of these signals, and that's how our brain is wired, and it sends all these signals to our nerves and our arms. That's why we can move our hands. That's why our mind can tell our mouth to speak. Obviously, artificial intelligence in theory will never be able to replicate that entirely, because we are like a CPU and we're like a GPU and we're like a motherboard. We're wired in a similar fashion where our brain, similar to an artificial brain that they're trying to develop now, which is CGI, Central General Intelligence, and it takes decades to absorb all this content, all this information, and sort of compile it. And when we go down for sleep, what your brain is doing is it's processing everything. We're rebooting. And people don't think about it this way. This is why we need to reboot. And it goes into cleaning phase, and it goes into restoration phase, oftentimes like a computer does, by the way. I don't know if you guys ever thought about this, but most of our healing happens during sleep. The way our gut replenishes itself, the way our cells rebuild itself. When we're resting, that's when wounds are healed, bacteria are killed, our white blood cells go to fight for us. All these things are very powerful. And all of these things happen because we're essentially one big artificial intelligent, basically, creation, comparatively due to God. Obviously, God has given us flesh. He's given us a soul. He's given us all these other things. But I'm saying, just hypothetically, if you're comparing us to a computer, that's how the way we're built. Except the main difference between us and them, a robot, is we do have a soul. We have a soul that was imprinted with a stamp of God. because it says we are built in the image of God. We are built in his image. In other words, his love, his emotions, his personality, his persona are stamped inside of us. We are sealed with his basically characteristics. And so when there's a lot of stuff that happens, I mean, we even anger, by the way, is a characteristic of God. God gets angry. God is passionate. God is loving. God is hardworking. God is all of those things. Everything that we see, God is. And a lot of those things that are anti-God, anti what God created, is of the devil. In other words, it's Satanism. It's the opposite. It's slothfulness. It's evil. It's rage. It's murder. It's evil intent. It's cunningness. It's everything that opposite of what God wants for our life. So I kind of want to get back on topic here. So these three things, by the way, are very, very, very important to our liberties, to our America. And I think it's important for people to know. And I'm going to, obviously, I scattered a sprinkle of videos here just for pure entertainment, fireworks, and some excerpts here from the Declaration of Independence and this and that. And during this Declaration, by the way, of Independence, it says, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. They were the colonies because they were part of the original Britain colonies. When they separated away, that's when they became states, by the way. For people that don't know the basic history and didn't study, didn't pay attention in your history classes in elementary school, that's what they stand for. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, he's referring to Britain, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and the equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitled them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So he's basically doing an introductory statement saying, this is why we are doing this. We have to create separation because it becomes necessary to dissolve these ideologies because it's natural and God intended it that way. Nature's God entitled them, right? As he says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator, who is God, with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, derived their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to the effects of their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and according all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, he's talking about the usurp of basically the Britain and the colonies that they had, pursuing invariability, the same object evinces a design to reduce them under the absolute despotism. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former system of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having an indirect object, the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governments to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he was utterly neglected to attend them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless these people would relinquish the rights of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to the tyrants only. And I'm not going to read all of this, guys, but ultimately this is like a 20-minute read probably, if you want to read all of it. But this is kind of the entry-level stuff. He's essentially pointing all of these things out. So let me give it to you in a couple of modern points here, in bullet points in modern English. Sometimes the people have the right to separate from another nation and become independent. That was the first sentence that he said. When they do, they should explain the reasons for their decisions, which they do. All people are created equal, which he mentions. Our rights come from a creator, not from a government. Every person has the right to their unalienable rights, which is life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Governments exist to protect these rights, or they're supposed to anyways. Governments receive their authority from the consent of the people, and this is where the term comes, we the people. If a government repeatedly violates these rights, the people have the right to and change or abolish it and create better governments. Governments should not overthrow over a small temporary problem. But when they are a long pattern of abuse and tyranny, the people have both the right and the duty to resist. We remember this during COVID, where they were trying to shut everybody down and everybody just folded over like sheep. It was our obligation, by the way, guys, and duty to fight the tyranny. I don't give a crap in what name they're coming. In the name of safety, in the name of unity, in the name of health. They're going to come every which way. In the name of finance, they're going to come every which way. And of course, this is why he continues and he says, King George III repeatedly abuses his power. He refuses to approve laws that benefit colonies. He dissolves elect colony legislators. He denies the colonies fair representation. He interferes with the courts and controlled judges. He imposes taxes without colonist consent. He restricts trade with other nations. He forces colonists to house British soldiers. That's what happens when they came and occupied that area, and where George Washington was trying to fight them off. He denies colonists trial by jury in many cases. And then he forces him to go overseas and stand trial in front of the biased, unjust system that is in England. He suspends colonist governments and claims unlimited authority over them. He declares war on the colonies. British forces burned down towns, destroyed property, and killed colonists. He hires foreign mercenaries to fight against the colonies. He encourages attacks and violence against the colonies. And this is the response of the colonies. The colonies repeatedly asked the king to correct these wrongs peacefully. Their petitions were ignored, or answers were more oppressed. They also appealed to the British people, but those appeals were rejected as well. Separation becomes absolutely critical and necessary in these situations, guys. And so this is the true declaration. The 13 colonies declared themselves to be a free and independent state. They ended all political allegiance to the British crown. They claimed the full rights of an independent nation, including the power to wage war, make peace, form alliances, establish trade, and govern themselves. Their signers pledged to support one another with their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. So this is important for you guys to know, for people that don't really know on what America was built on. We're in a kind of a, I want to say transitional phase right now where we're sort of being overthrown by the Israeli government, similarly to the way that the British government had control over us back in the days. In fact, back in the days, it was also illegal to say anything bad about the Brits. Before the Declaration of Independence was signed, if you said anything bad about the Brits, you could be imprisoned. They would take you overseas and basically put you on trial for basically being committing espionage or committing some heinous crime where it wasn't called hate speech back then. There was no such thing as racism. The Jews hadn't had time to create all of those terms yet. I say that kind of facetiously, but it's semi-true. And so what's interesting about this is we are in a parallel to that universe We need to create a separation. And there are a few people like Thomas Massie that have come forward and are willing to give up their lives and their fortunes and of course, their sacred honor. Those are the three things. He gave up his fortune. He understands that if he bows down to the system, if he listens to everything they have to say, he's going to continue to have the fake power, the illusion of power to people. But when he speaks out against them, they start to shun him. They start to bring stuff to light. And Thomas Massie, by the way, knowing the fact that he's not a pedophile, knowing the fact that he doesn't have a whole lot to lose when it comes to a lot of these things, he's not the wealthiest person in the world. He essentially loses the one thing that he's left, which is his honor, because now they're spitting in his image and in his reputation, and they're saying that he's all of these nasty things. I remember when Kavanaugh was being awarded as one of the judges to sit on the federal judgeship. I mean, all of these allegations surfaced because they didn't want the Democrats to lose their authority, their majority, I should say, in that judicial branch. So they did anything and everything to try to discourage him to run for judgeship. And they did anything and everything to try to spit in his image and to basically discredit him. And I will tell you, if I ever become even remotely a voice of reason here in the world, I will tell you that they will probably dig very deep to find all the dirt on me. And I will say this, I've done a lot of stupid stuff growing up as a kid. I've transitioned from that. And I will tell you that God redeemed me. I didn't ultimately find God until I was probably in my, I want to say, early 20s. 90% of the stupidity that I did, drinking, being reckless, doing a bunch of stuff, partying through, my way through high school and early college days, I had left behind me. All the frivolous, things that happened with the law were behind me. There are other ways for government to try to incriminate you. They slap you with frivolous things like bird charges, where you hit a bird accidentally on a beach and all of a sudden you're a criminal. All of a sudden they want to drop a felony on your head, because the way that they dismantle you is by making you a criminal and demonizing you. That's the only tactic they have. That's what they try to do with Trump. They try to do that with Trump because he literally was a big threat to their quote unquote democracy. And of course, and Trump has his own baggage and his own agenda. He's more interested in becoming a trillionaire than anything else on the planet. He wants to take credit for just about everything that ever happens, no matter if it's his credit to be given or not. But I will tell you something, that I truly stand behind America, and I am America first. I will always be America first. Even though I was born in the Ukraine, I became a citizen shortly thereafter. My parents obviously migrated here with 3 children. So I'm first generation. And let me tell you something. I will never give my allegiance to Zelensky or the Ukraine. I will never give my allegiance to Putin and his cronies. My only allegiance is with America, because America is what I believe in. I believe in freedom. I believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe in all of these unalienable rights that are given to every single one of us. I believe in those. I truly do. And I believe that those rights align with God's truth. And I believe that America is the closest thing that we've ever gotten as a government that is both simultaneously a Christian government. Any other government you go into, whether it was originally the kings of Britain and anything else. Even when you stem back into history of the Bible, where there's a lot of kings, King Saul and everything, there was a lot of tyranny. There was a lot of oppression. There was a lot of stuff that went against God's laws and rules. There was a lot of idol worship. This is the closest we've gotten to somewhat aligning with God's truth. And unfortunately, that's being devoured. That's being destroyed, because the forces at hand, which is the devil, the synagogues of Satan, are trying to dismantle those. They don't want a nation to become powerful and self-sufficient. They don't want a nation to have the ability to make their own rules and to create peace treaties by themselves and do everything. They want basically war to be, they want our country to be in war. They want there to be chaos. So they're going to do everything to plant those things, whether it's quickly or long term. So happy birthday, America. Happy 250th birthday. Enjoy America. Pursue your happiness. Pursue your dreams. Don't be lazy. And enjoy everything that America truly has to give. Because we live in a nation that is beyond what you could have imagined comparatively. For people out there that are watching and you're in third world countries, or you're in areas where you're being basically squeezed out by migrants or corrupt governments where you can't speak up for yourselves. You have no idea how much true freedom America currently has. We are the only nation in the entire world that has the amount of freedom that we have now. Not for long, of course. Not as long as the Jews have something to say about it, because God forbid somebody offends their very, very sensitive, egotistical hearts, the very, very small Grinch hearts that they have. They're willing to kill Palestinian children. They call everybody animals. All of us goy are nothing to them. We're insufferable, but we are the only way to get them to their promised land, to their occupation, to their occupancy, where they occupy all of Gaza. They occupy part of Egypt. They take over part of Syria and Lebanon, and they infiltrate all of these surrounding areas. And by the way, there's a flag, a map on their uniforms that represents the aim of what they're trying to accomplish. They're not even covering it up anymore, by the way. I mean, when America does an outline of America, imagine if America did an outline and it actually took over all of Canada and parts of Mexico. What would you guys say about that? What would Mexico say about that? What would Canada say about that? You'd say, are you out of your mind? Why are you adding the map of other places on your military stamps, on your logos, on your branding, on your national documents? Because you want people, they're open about it. They want people to know that they plan on infiltrating and taking over all these areas. They're sort of open about it. They've already said, hey, and the craziest part is how cocky and confident they are that they will accomplish this. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. This is Veto Creed, God grant and glory, and stay tuned for more.